I always forget to unmute my mic. Amateur hour here with Ramon Perez. Oh my God. How you doing, Bill?
Ramon, doing great. Thanks for having me.
Oh, pleasure to have you here. And I'm excited the night before here to launch your campaign tomorrow. How are you feeling? I know that we tread lightly last year. We dipped in and then on a different platform, and we weren't too happy with what we were seeing with BackerKit, just because it was a new platform and they were trying to do campaigns, and we thought better to launch on Kickstarter when we were a little bit more prepared. So I know it's almost like pulling the curtain back twice.
It's all good, and the wait is worth it. I mean, this is publishing, man. Like, publishing is always throwing you curveballs, and it's always a matter of like, is the project ready for a marathon, not a sprint? So you just want to make sure you get everything ready to go, and I'm super excited. It's been great seeing things come together, and
I'm actually
launch. So
I'm really proud. Hello, Mama Deadhead. I'm really proud of what we were able to do with the book since we last started putting it together. We have an amazing artist gracing your cover, the cover work of the book. But first of all, before we dive in too far, why don't you introduce yourselves to people who don't know who you are, basically?
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, hi, everybody. My name is Bill Coffin. I am a writer. I live in coastal New Jersey, so don't hold that against me. But I've been writing and publishing for, a long time. I've written novels. I've written role-playing games. I'm a business journalist. Probably my greatest honor as a business journalist was writing about a comic book guy. So all my writing in my entire career has always circled around the fun stuff. Superheroes, knights in shining armor, spaceships, ray guns, all that good stuff. And now my latest adventure is this project, Omega Rain, with Raid Press.
And for those who don't know, we actually have a long history together. We met back in, was it the 90s or early 2000s? It's kind of a blur.
Dude, it was the late 90s.
It was the late 90s, yeah. So probably like 98, maybe 99, around there somewhere.
I was gonna say 98, yeah.
Yeah, and basically we both worked at Palladium Books, the RPG company. Yep. We both kind of got our feet wet, so to speak, in freelancing as creators for at that time RPGs, role-playing games. I worked on Palladium Fantasy, Rifts, Nightbane. I'm blanking on the titles right now. After the Bomb and that sort of thing. And I remember we worked together on a few of your fantasy books, if not more, and enjoyed some weekends in Detroit playing RPGs and doing some conventions, I think, together over the years as well.
Good times.
You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So it's nice to actually reconnect now in a different manner, getting our own ideas out there and getting them out into the world for people to enjoy. And actually, to add to that, not just RPGs, when you made the shift from RPGs to doing a little bit more magazine work, you were working for some financial publications. You actually called me up to do some covers for these magazines, which was actually, for me, was a joy, because it was actually doing something out of the norm that I wouldn't normally, it was like, I remember just like it allowed me to play with my concept-driven side of my brain, which you don't get much to do in comics all the time, right?
Yeah. I don't have a full archive of that magazine that I worked on, but I kind of like kept select issues. But all the Ramon issues, I definitely hung on to, because they're always such a hoot. Because like whenever we had you on for a job, like the designer would come by, he's like, "Yo, man, Ramon's art is in," and it would just like clear the house. We're like, "We gotta go see what's going on." It was such a riot, It
was a lot of fun.
It was great. It was, it's about, that gets to the heart of like why we do all these things, which is about creativity. It's a matter of. It's people are like, because I remember when we were like, well, who do we want to bring on? I'm like, well, I know a guy who's really fantastic, and I think he'd love to do something a little bit different, and I think we should give him a shot. I'm like, well, is he with an agency? I'm like, no, and that's the cool part, because we can work with him directly. And I remember this one person was like, all right, well, do you trust him? I'm like, yeah, I trust him. Like, actually, I worked with him before, and I was like, you have to trust your artist, because if you
sure,
can't trust them, then you're not going to get anything creative. You're going to get just strictly programmatic stuff, and that's not where the magic happens. So if you want magic, then we got to have trust, and that's how we pursued it, and magic happened, right? Again and again.
Oh no, like I can't remember how many. It might have been like half a dozen. I can't recall now. It's been a while,
yeah, it was a
but
bunch. It was a bunch.
I think there was mostly covers, but I think I did one or two interiors, and
yeah,
I had a lot of fun with them. They were portfolio pieces for a long time for me because, like you said, you trusted your artist, and that meant I get to play and have fun. So I'm going to do my best work and push the envelope a little bit, kind of, which is a lot of fun. But enough about me. Let's dive into Omega Rain. The book which is the first book of a trilogy that you wrote, but you had originally self-published a shorter version of Omega Rain early on. Like this is you took a story that you've expanded on over 3 volumes, if I'm correct. Can you tell us a little bit of history?
Yeah. So the original history of it was, I'd written this really, really short, version of it, just sort of as like a one shot. And actually, and I was working with, I had a friend who was running this really cool little micro press called Reliquary Press, and we published it through that. But it was super, super, very, very intimate, and it was a lot of fun to do. But and then of course, after a while, Reliquary, went on its own way. And I got the rights to Omega Rain back, and I was always like, I wanted to do more with this than I did initially. And the more I let it sit, and that's really the gift of doing it through Reliquary, gave me, which is they gave me a chance to stop for a second and just sort of think on it, going, all right, am I happy with where this is, or do I want this to go further? And I was like, I want this to go further. I want this to go a lot further. And so I ended up doing a second volume and then a third volume. And then after the third volume, I'm like, you know what? That first volume never really sat right with me. So I wanted to go all the way back and then kind of really tear it down and totally expand it and kind of rewrite it entirely. And that's what kind of, got us where we were. So I ended up writing Omega Rain really like 3 or 4 times, I guess. I kept coming back to it and refiguring it because I realized that there was something, it meant a lot to me, that I guess what it really was. And I just loved going back. I loved going back to it. And that was more so than any other project I've ever done. I kind of hate having to go back to rewrite things, but Omega Rain, I was always happy to go back to it, and to see with it.
Did you? So that when could you give us a bit of a timeline on? Yeah, that arc of you creating, because I know like a lot of the work happened. From what I recall you telling me was over the pandemic you actually wrote the 3 novels. Is that correct? But does it take back? So I would say, well, I wrote the third. So the whole thing started in like 2000 and gosh, I think I started ideating it in like 2009, right? And it kind of chipped away at it. I did that first quick, version of it in like 2010 or so. I think 2012 was when it first kind of went out with Reliquary and sort of sat for a little while. And then in 2017 or thereabouts, it reverted back to me. And I was like, okay, what do I really want to start doing with this? And that's when I'm like, you know what? I'm going to further develop it. And I had written the second novel and was like, it was such a downer because like it's the second part of basically a 3-part cycle. Yeah. And so the second part always ends on a downer. And I was so like torn up. Like, I can't go on, man. And I actually had a friend, actually he's in the chat right now, who was like, dude, like these characters deserve a second chance. You gotta see this through. And I'm like, no. Like, Tom, you're right. I'll do it. And I started working on that. And during the pandemic was really when I kind of finished. It was actually right before the pandemic. I finished the third and then went back to the first. And that 2020 year was really like just super Omega Rain year because I was just focusing on that. And by the time the pandemic was really kind of cooling off was when I felt like, you know what, I think this is ready to share with people and see what I could see where this might land. Yeah. And I find that interesting because I kind of work the same way on long form stories. I feel like as you write something of that length, because each book is about 350 pages or so, or roughly anyways, you kind of get to know the characters as you start really experiencing their journey through them almost. I find like the characters, my experience anyway, the characters start to lead you along. So you kind of almost have to go back to the beginning and kind of refresh them a little bit to better match what they become, if that makes sense. No, it makes total sense. And there's a comment from Mama Deadhead that saying that it aged like a fine wine, and I totally agree with that because what had happened was I wrote that first
the first volume, which was kind of underweight, and then did the second and third volume. By the time I got to the end of the third volume, I really knew where this was going. I really knew the characters. And when I went back to the first, I'm like, okay, now how true does that first one feel? Because I've lived with these characters, and they've been sharing their secrets with me for so long. I've been hearing them tell me their stories. And I was like, you know what? I haven't done right by these characters. And that's really why I wanted to just go, you know what? I just got to tear down this first one to the timbers and start over again with what I know. And it's one of the only projects where I've actually gone back to the beginning and started over again based off of what I learned from the subsequent volumes. So in that respect, I'm really grateful for how this has had kind of an unusual progression to it. But I think it's actually delivered something wonderful to me. And when I went back to these characters to kind of reintroduce myself to them, it was really quite cool. Like I was like, they were just as cool as I remember them, and they were like, it was almost like they were waiting for me. Not to get too metaphysical about it, but it was a really cool reunion, and I was like, I'm ready to do you guys justice, and it was a lot of fun to do that.
It's actually a wonderful thing to kind of return to a work, and I mean, I'm going through that now very late, and people will yell at me. But with my revisiting a story with a new perspective years later. Revisiting characters who are intrinsically a part of you, but they're their own entities as well, right?
Yeah.
And which I find truly fascinating, because I always, you always hear the cliche, the characters will write themselves, and you're like, whatever, but they actually kind of do. Like they actually my experience is like you're almost like you're almost ascribed to these characters. You're kind of just like recording their journey for them, basically. That's been my experience.
I feel that intensely. And somebody who used to talk about that was Robert E. Howard, the creator of Conan the Barbarian. Yep. And he used to talk about, how the Cimmerian would stand over my shoulder, kind of like, dictate his adventures to him. And it's like that. Like when you're writing, you get into like a flow state, and there will be times I'll be writing these scenes, and people will laugh, but it's like there are certain times I'm just so locked in, and these characters are just kind of, it's just flowing out. And, I kind of stop for a second. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's like, what happened? Right. Cause and I have to go back. I got kind of blacked out there. Like, what exactly? Exactly. It's like you're tapping into something and you're not quite sure it's there. And it's a cool thing. That's why writing's such a special experience too. That's why I love it. Because it's like, there's so much that goes into it. And you know what? Any kind of creative endeavor is like this. You get in that flow state and you tap into this energy that really drives it all. Sure. It's a glorious burden we have.
That's and they're trying to steal it away with AI these days. I'm like, why are you taking away the fun things?
Right? For as much work as it is, it delivers such intense joy, though. And that's why the publishing journey is an arduous one, but it's so worth it, because every labor is in service of something that you love and something that really matters. And so it's not quite as heavy lifting as it could be.
Yeah. No, agreed. And speaking, you mentioned this in the video, and we mentioned a bit in the campaign, but this actually had some personal roots for you, or the impetus did for the novel, stemming to your brother, his passing, and this kind of joint history you guys shared of comic books, basically.
Yeah. So.
Dive on in. Sorry.
No, sorry. No. So I had a brother. I had a brother named Tom. He and I were less than a year apart in age. So we were thick as thieves. And we both we fell in love with comic books together. And for a long time, like we were super Marvel files. And for a time, we had pooled our cash and subscribed to everything Marvel had to offer. And we were just totally into it. And we read them together. We would argue about the stories together. We would do the who would beat who kind of conversations together, all that sort of stuff. And we were very, very tight like that. Unfortunately, I lost Tom in 2009. He died by suicide in 2009, which is very tragic, very sad. And so I had to go on a grief journey about that, as everyone who has experienced that kind of loss does. Of course, and as I was doing that, you learn a lot of things about yourself. And I had already been kind of thinking. I had this notion of what would make a superhero grieve, and when I was going through myself, I'm like, now I know exactly what would make a superhero grieve, and that was kind of dark. It was kind of dark territory to go through to kind of process all that. But at the same time, though, alongside all of that was this jubilant love for this medium. I mean, Tom and I, we love comic books, right? We love superheroes. He loved them, I loved them, love different things about them. We love different heroes. We love some of the same heroes, you know. But there's always that joyous, you know, energy that it delivered to us. And as we got older, we started to appreciate that, you know, yeah, you can do different things with this medium as well. Superheroes aren't just, you know, mindless action. You can tell all kinds of wonderful stories with this, and that really stuck with me. And I had always wanted to write a superhero story. We had talked about, you know, Palladium Books before. I had done some superhero books with Palladium Books, and that really gave me the bug. I created a whole superhero universe and had so much fun. I'm like, man, I want to write superhero stories. And so, you know, some years later, all this happened, and I was like, you know what? I think I want to write some superhero stories, you know, based off of this, to both as a way to kind of explore new territory, but also to celebrate, frankly, just the fun and cool stuff about these stories as well. They can be heavy, they can be effervescent at the same time. That's kind of the magic of this subject matter.
No, for sure. I remember, it's funny. I just spent some time in Montreal a couple of weeks ago with the Lethal crew, Carl Kerschel, Andy Belanger, and we hit up this massive comic store. I think it was called Comic Hunter, if I recall. And I was impressed. I'd never seen a comic shop this big. And we spent a good couple hours there just rifling through old comics. I picked up some. I was a big sci-fi fantasy nerd growing up, so I loved was it the Sword of the Atom was what I picked up there. I don't know if you remember those with you know, they're basically riffing off of John Carter of Mars, but putting it into
like the planetary romance.
Exactly, right. And we went back to the studio, and I actually read a couple of these things, and there is a very particular vibe to that era. This is like late 70s to probably late 80s of comics that I don't think really exists anymore. Like, there was a particular way they were written, and contained in their issues that, like, these days we do. There a lot more publishing houses are doing like the long form. We're making it for the graphic novel or the trade paperback, which is fine. I have nothing against it, but it was interesting to read these comics, and actually, it really took me back to like me sitting on my bed with a pile, you know, and going through them and just being so satisfied with each one. Now, do you by any chance recall the first comics that you picked up? Like
the very first comics I ever picked up?
Like with your own accord or your own money or whatever it might be.
Yeah. So there's a couple different answers to that, because there's the first comic. The first comic I ever actually remember owning was a comic. It was like one of those. I was really little, and I'm not going to date myself, so I'm not going to give the year. But it was back when Marvel was doing every once in a while, Marvel would do these like special like magazine style crazy super issues.
Oh yeah,
right. And I remember it was one of those. It was a Spider-Man one, kind of like an anthology issue. Had all these stories in it, and for the life of me, I do not remember the title. The I can't find it digitally, but like this one haunts my life because it's the first time I had a book, and it was Spider-Man, and it just like it swallowed me whole. I couldn't process what I was reading. Yeah. The first book I remember actually getting with my own money was Uncanny X-Men. I believe it's. I should know the number, and honestly, I'm embarrassed. Now it's
it's
I think it's like 170. I think it's 176. It's an issue. It's an issue where it's during the Claremont years, the Claremont John Romita Jr. years. Punk Aurora had just happened, right? So in that period of time. Yeah, but before the trial of Magneto, right? And it was this, and I'll tell you the issue. It starts off with Colossus is there. He's petrified. The Brotherhood of Evil Mutants have ambushed him and Kitty Pryde. They've nearly killed Colossus. There's this big fight. Kitty has to go run and get help. Heroes have to come. Massive battle. Mystique shows up at the mansion and almost kills Xavier. It was like so much story in one comic. My brain just exploded. I'm like, this is comics? And I was like, okay, all my money is going to this now, like all of it, you know? And that's how a deep love was formed. It was those Uncanny X-Men in particular. There were comics I read before that. Like my friends had a really extensive comic collection. That's where I got to learn like Frank Miller. They had like Frank Miller Daredevil and the John Byrne X-Men. So I got to read those, but I was like on like a library basis. The first ones I actually owned, where I like my collection begins now. It started with those like not quite like 175 to 200
No,
Uncanny
I
X-Men.
remember that era. That's around the same time I started. That's like there were a few like one shots. I think like Alan Davis did a one shot, and then what was it? Barry Windsor Smith, I think. All these like
He did a
great.
couple of the Life Death ones. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So there were all
Yeah.
these. Because I think I started to pick them up around 180 or so around. Then I started to go back a little bit. And then at that time was also, I believe, Marvel was releasing Classic X-Men, which was kind of reprinting issues 1 through, I want to say 100, if I remember correctly. It's been a while.
Thereabouts. And no, I remember I was a fiend for Classic X-Men because, at that time, and this is something about the way they wrote comics then as well, in particular. And this is true of Marvel, but also true of DC. It was just, but it was like, you were deeply aware of that you were diving into a continuity of something, that it had story before you showed up. There would be story after you stopped reading, and you wanted to know all of it, but you simply couldn't, right? As a kid, you just couldn't get access to all these issues. And the editors would always the characters would be talking, and some editor would be like, as in back in issue 151, editor, and you're like, oh, you're killing me, man. It's like Jumpin' Jim tells you that's back in 9. Like, dude, it's an arrow in my heart. I can't get 151. I'm never going to get 151. Stop taunting me.
But we talked a little bit about that, and I think the one thing those issues did very well was they represented the characters every issue. So like every issue, you knew that Wolverine was the best at what he did, and what he did wasn't very nice.
Very nice.
I mean, it would be reiterated at one point in that issue. And so, like, if you're collecting regularly, you're like, okay, I get it, Chris, I get it. But as a reader who just dives in, you had everything you needed to enjoy the story. You didn't feel like you were missing out on what happened before, but you could slowly discover it if you could by rifling through the package.
There was something else about those comics at that time, and this is beyond just Uncanny X-Men. And I saw it across all Marvel comics I read at that time, and all DC comics really, and even as the indie comic scene started to burgeon, at that point in time as well. And this is, I don't want to sound like a crotchety old, like, they don't do it like they used to kind of thing, but but it's just the reality of, like, comics themselves had not gotten as huge and as mainstream as they did get. And so, and I remember actually, I got to interview Jim Shooter one time, and rest in peace. We lost a titan. But he was talking about how, like, comics at that point in time, they were the sort of thing where you only got into them if you truly loved them, or if you had nowhere else to go as a writer, which is kind of hilarious to think. Like, nowadays, you're like, I would love to write comics, and thinking about comics as like a dead end career is kind of hard for the modern writer to imagine. But it used to be like that, right? But because that's how writers came into comics at that time, usually what informed them as writers and creators weren't necessarily other comics. They were like they were literature, there were things outside of that. And so that huge melange of influences came together in this crazy like cauldron of imagination that was comics in the late 70s, throughout the 80s, into the early 90s. And it just had this particular vibe to it that was really quite interesting, unique. And that informed me as a writer in general. And I just love that whole take something from everywhere piece. And that's what gave me the notion of, like, comics can tell any story you want them to, because they contain every story,
Yeah. No, that's very true. We have a quick question here from Mama Deadhead. Let me see if I can find it here. If you could describe the process of creating the Omega Reign story in 3 words, what would they be? That's a big pressure there.
Just 3 words. As you can tell, I give long answers to short questions, but I'll keep it to 3 words. It would be discovery, tragedy, redemption.
That kind of almost describes the trilogy quite nicely, actually.
One might say,
I like it.
Exactly. Great question, by the way. Wonderful question.
One thing, it's kind of riffing off what we're talking about with old comics, and one thing they did quite well back then was character names, superhero names, and their alter egos. And you have a lot of fun with this in the book. You create some very, very interesting names, like Eleanor Graves, Death Knell.
Yeah. Oh no, I think we have a hiccup in transmission. Well, in case we don't get Ramon back, I think I know where the question was going, which was, where do I get the name ideas from? And that was something I worked, actually an awful lot of energy went into that. And it was a matter of, in comic books, a lot of the great obvious superhero and supervillain names are already spoken for. They're already taken. And so I did an awful lot of effort to really make sure that the names I was going to use weren't being used previously. And a lot of superhero names are just a one word thing, right? It's Hyperion, something like that, and they're super cool. But I chose to do a lot of two word names. So I've got a guy named like Iron Will, Death Knell, and I do a lot of plays on just sort of typical nicknames, but elevate it into a superhero title. And I had a lot of fun with that, and folks really seem to enjoy it. And it's like this is a good example of a old character sketch of mine. I will say right off the bat, I enjoy drawing. I am not a particularly good artist, and I say that keeping the company of folks like Ramon, I am by no means a professional artist. But I did a lot of doodling as I ideated Omega Rain. So this is a character I just drew up this Superman looking guy, and I just called him Supremator. And I was like, Supremator is never going to work as a name. It's either it's already in use, or it's too close to other names. And so I was like, all right, so how do I come up with other names? And a lot of it was I started going the other way, going rather than coming up with a superhero name and then what's their alias, I came up with their alias and then go, okay, what would this person's name as a superhero be, knowing what their alias is? And so I kind of went about it in that way. So our protagonist is a guy named Simon Rand, because he's the strongest hero in Hudson City, but he's got a lot of baggage and he's got a lot of problems going on. And in many ways, he's not the guy you look up to. So I was thinking Simon, like Simon Says, Rand, and I've got some negative connotations with that word. I figured put them together, Simon Rand, and who would he be? You think of him as a Superman kind of character, but what if he's a character who is more about, protecting things the way they are as opposed to protecting everybody? And that's where I came up, well, what kind of protector would that be? And I was like, maybe a Praetorian, right? So, somebody who protects an emperor. So that's how I got Simon Rand, the Praetorian. And Simon has been in my head constantly. He's the lodestar for this entire thing. And I just kept noodling with him all the time. Because I like, and also, to be perfectly honest with you, once I come up with a name, I say it a bunch of times. I'll go in a room where nobody can see me and I'll say it dramatically, Praetorian, and kind of do all that sort of comic book talk. I feel very goofy when I do it, but what it does is it helps me stress test, like, does this name feel right? Does it feel comic booky, And I did that again and again and again and again. I did a lot of internet research on if I had a name, is this name in use anywhere else? Because I really didn't want to have to deal with, I have a character, I love their name, and I have to give the name up because it's already in use someplace. So I wanted to avoid that outcome. But I worked an awful lot on that. And that was one of the more fun parts of this project. I have to give a huge shout out to my close circle of friends and readers and family. For years, they listened to me bounce character names off them constantly. And they were always like, that's a good one. That one's in use. That one stinks. Try again. And, we think of writing as a solitary activity, but you have your people around you. We talked about trust before. You get your trusted circle that you can bounce stuff off of, and you depend upon them for your very creative life. So to all those folks who are in my circle, you know who you are. Man, I love you because you have been so good to me. You've been so good to me.
That's so awesome. Yeah. Sorry to just appeared there. My internet connection went all haywire, but agreed. I often, like, when working on things, will share and get people's input on stories. And what was I gonna say? The one thing you were talking about art, and you're sketching out the characters. I saw some images being shared. Was it difficult for you to take a medium that is a visual medium? Superheroes are often comic books, and now they're obviously movies. How did you translate that into just prose? Like, was there did you try to recreate that vibe in some capacity that echoed comics and the films that we're seeing these days, or was it just something that came naturally?
That's a really good question. I don't want to say it came naturally, because then it sounds like I didn't work at it, because I definitely did work at it. But I'll say this though. There were certain comic book writers who I love, who I think would write in a more cinematic style, and as I obsessed over their work, Frank Miller in particular is one. He writes in a very cinematic style, and I think I would always often look at like, where are the words landing, how do they interplay with the pictures, that sort of thing. And then I was like, well, okay, how am I going to do this without pictures? And part of it was just a matter of, I want these characters to take off, and I want them to blow stuff up, and I want them to knock things over. I just want the powers to go crazy. And I'm like, 350 pages of powers going crazy is going to exhaust even me, right? So there was always a sense of restraint. Like, when do I get the super to be the super? And that tension, I think, is what I really I rode that like as lightning, because I'm like, if I can maintain that tension, and so when the superhero stuff happens, it really, bam, it just has a lot of power and energy to it. My thought would be that will carry the impact that a glorious splash page would carry, or a great 2-page spread would carry, because I can't quite do that. But there are times though when I try to do things like laying out the text, where I'll just actually play with the words themselves, just because I want to kind of remind everybody that this is a story with roots in a visual medium. So if I, so when I was playing with the manuscript, I'd have, certain visual artifacts that would just kind of look weird on the page, just because deep down, it's a comic book in my head.
Echoing the roots.
I tried to write as a comic book, and I was like, it spoke to me more as prose. So. Yeah.
We got Studio Jean-Guy here as asking, was there any character that gave you a hard time as you were trying to bring them to life?
Yes, that is such a wonderful question. And I kind of know exactly who the character is. And the character is one of my absolute favorites of the entire series. It's a woman named Ellen Dubinovich, whose code name is Sigma. And her whole thing is she sees the future, right? She's a clairvoyant. She's kind of like superhero air traffic controller. She can see, and she doesn't do a lot of stuff in the field anymore. She kind of stays back in space, looking through the different possible futures, seeing when bad stuff's going to happen, then vectoring a good guy to take care of it. And I love this character so much. And over the course of the story, she goes through quite an arc. And I think for me, I was like, well, how do I? We talk about characters who are telling you what's going on. How do I get ahead of a character who can literally see ahead in time? And I often struggle with trying to imagine how Ellen saw a world that I am powerless to see, because I don't have clairvoyance, right? I can't see into time. And that was a really interesting creative communion as I try to deeply imagine how she behaves, how she thinks. That I think is the aspect where I grew the most as a writer in this particular project, was trying to take myself into a way of seeing that I just couldn't even imagine before I started all this.
Nice. Oh, yeah. Very, very cool, dude. I think now's the time to share the video. I'm not sure if people have seen it yet. It's on our landing page, but we thought we'd share it here first for people who haven't seen it. So we'll roll with that, and then I think we'll dive. We'll be chatting now for almost 40 minutes. So I figure we could then talk a bit about the campaign itself, which I think would be a great idea. All right, roll it, Rob.
Hi, I'm Bill Coffin, and this is Omega Rain. I've always loved superheroes, the unhinged stories, the larger-than-life characters, the way they make the impossible feel possible. My brother Tom and I were those comic book kids, debating Byrne's Fantastic Four versus Superman, mourning Rom's cut from the Secret Wars, agreeing that nothing beat Batman decking Guy Gardner. In 2009, Tom passed away, and I returned to those colorful stories that we shared. Within those panels, I found unexpected strength in those tales of courage, hope, and perseverance. Omega Rain took shape. This is a superhero novel about cosmic threats and wild powers, but it's also about the battles we fight on the inside. It's about loss, both big and small, and the dark places our minds can wander. It's also about joy, imagination, and why we fall in love with heroes in the first place. This is the story I've always wanted to tell. I hope it means something to you. Dude, I'm smiling so
That's
hard
pretty
my
dope.
dimples hurt. That is awesome,
You know
man.
what,
That looks so cool.
Oh, that's Kyle Smith here in our studio does wonderful work. He is a master, and I'm always happy with what he brings forth. Speaking of letting people do what they do best, we just give him the assets and the theme and the idea, and we're just like run with it. And every time it's gold. So a big thanks to Kyle Smith for doing that video. His book, actually, Black Belt, that we did end of last year will be coming out soon. It's on a slow boat. Or actually, no, it's a slow train now from Vancouver to Toronto. So we're excited to get that out. Actually, watching the video actually made me want to ask you, you're now having these characters visualized. Andrew Robinson, who I'm not sure if people know his work, from everything from Dusty Star to I believe it was the Fifth Beatle to various, all kinds of graphic novels and comics over the years. Like, that man is an artistic genius. I share this same agent with him at Essential Sequential, and like I've seen him work. I look over his shoulder, so he's fully painted. This is like a watercolor cover. The image in the trailer is not done. He sent us a couple of in progress snapshots. How does it feel seeing these characters come to life in this comic book aesthetic? Is it hitting?
Oh, dude, it is an immense thrill. To see your work visualized like that is extraordinarily validating and super fun. And it's also letting you know, like, the highest thing you can achieve as a storyteller is when you create a story and seeing it take life in other people's minds, other people's hearts, right? And seeing your work take life in some way through another creative's craft, that your work cannot be honored in a higher way. And seeing somebody like him put that effort into something I created, and seeing him breathe this very special life into it, it just fills my heart with joy, and it's just immensely touching to see and super exciting. And I totally dig it. So it looks great. I remember I saw an initial sketch and I posted on Instagram, and people I didn't know were like, "That's fire!" I'm like, I know, I'm awfully lucky because I get to merit that kind of treatment. So I'm pretty excited to see it. Yeah.
No, we had before Andrew came on, we had Klaus Janson actually. We were working with him on doing some cover concepts and stuff like that, but unfortunately, he had to step away for personal reasons, which was unfortunate. But I think we truly lucked out with Andrew. He's, like I said, a killer artist, and
for sure.
I kind of want to see a comic book now of these characters.
You and me both. Well, what's really cool though is, like, when you see that kind of realization, you see details in the characters you hadn't imagined yourself, right? And that's that's really special to see that, like, okay, and see certain characters, like, and it's funny, some writers can get really possessive, like, well, that's not how I imagine it. But I think for me, it's like, no, you got to let go and see what this can do in the mind of somebody else, and just revel in the fact that it's become something greater than you could have imagined on your own. And that's the joy of collaboration. And I so embrace it, because I'm still smiling from seeing that trailer. I'm so psyched to see it. But it's seeing this work interpreted, and that's a really, it's a rare treat to earn that kind of access to somebody. And you gotta honor that for what it is.
No, agreed. I mean, that's the joy of comics too. Like, if you actually look at over the history of comics over the past, we're not too far off 100 years, probably 80 years now, or maybe it's 100. I have no idea. But just like all the varying iterations of Spider-Man or Batman or Superman, every artist brings a stamp. So should the time come when another artist takes their take on Praetorian or one of the other characters, you're going to always get a slightly different viewpoint or stylized character. You know what I mean? So
I will hit you with something to that very point that'll bring this kind of in a full circle, which is one of the first things you and I ever worked on together was those Century Station books with Palladium Books.
That's right. Yeah.
And I remember thinking, I've hit it big time. Ramon Perez is actually going to illustrate one of my books. I'm so excited. This was something that brings us back to Omega Rain. There was a character in Century Station named Kincave the Fighting Parrot, who was this like commando like this commando parrot, right? And the thing is, you illustrated him. He was a cigar chomping, like if Nick Fury was a green macaw with the Tommy gun. That's the thing is, and you did this illustration. It's so sweet. I'm like, oh my God. I was like, I can't believe this. It's such a good looking image. Here's the thing though, Ramon. That character was my brother's character in the game.
Oh shit! Interesting.
You illustrated Tom's character in the superhero book that ultimately got me on the path to create Omega Rain, which got me on the path to with you. So these things are all kind of connected in a weird, beautiful way. That's why that piece, it brings you wonderful places if you let it.
No, that's true. Actually, I think you summed up my entire career. It's just kinetic moments, like pinballing off each other, whether it's people, places, or projects. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't have had it any other way. Like, it's been a joy to have a career like I have, and no doubt you have had as well. Just like, and I often say, like, my time in comics, like especially at Marvel, more briefly at DC, I did more Marvel work, but part of the fun was that collaboration, working with writers, hearing their vision, then realizing it, and then kind of playing in that sandbox kind of thing, and bringing my own voice to that. Speaking of, let's talk books. So we have this isn't the real book, but we have a proof from the printer, which is always fun. They send us these things, so you get a feel for it. So, like, nice. It's going to be, this is crazy. It's kind of blank. I should actually just send it to you. You can be your official blank version of Omega Rain. And 320 pages. This is the hardcover. It's 5x8, cloth bound in a beautiful blue. We're thinking gold foil on the cover, and then we'll have a nice dust jacket. But I think let's take this moment and we'll lead ourselves into the campaign. And we can kind of share it with people, give them a little sneak peek as to what's launching tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern time. Shall we?
Can't wait. Yeah, let's do it.
So here we go. So we are going to be asking for 10K Canadian, which is probably like, what, $5 American? I'm not sure. But to get us to the goal to cover the publication of the book. The book itself, that'll get us in the black, cover the book and everything else involved in the project. And as we scroll through here, we have a bit of Andrew's art smattering over everything, which is great. Like, this is just a black. What I love is this is just his underpainting. This is like the black and white. There's going to be full color earth on there, highlights. It's going to be a lot of fun. And he's working quite large on this too. I've seen photos. This thing is like massive. So it's a beautiful painting. And here's this portion here is actually the back cover, right? Yes. So we have a few of the other characters occurring on the back. So it's going to be a wraparound cover on both the soft cover and the hardcover edition. The hardcover will be the dust jacket. The soft cover obviously will be soft cover. And then we hear with the tiers, we're keeping it very basic, very clean. We have your EPUB, your ebook, for people to get who want just the digital, or maybe they don't want to pay for shipping, but they want to read the book. This is a great way to not only support, but also get a great book. And you still get cover art. It's digital, but you get it there. As the world goes into turmoil, shipping has become a little more expensive, a little more difficult. So we totally understand when people opt in for the digital option. And at the end of the day, they have to realize that's still a great supporting factor in getting, for sure, the creators' works out there, basically. And then we have the soft cover here, and each of these, the soft cover and the hardcover, come with a tip-in plate, which will be numbered to the campaign. And the tip-in plate is usually like a little postcard-sized placard, I guess, if you want to call it that some people will glue into the book. Other people keep them and collect them separately. So they will be numbered to the campaign, denoting that people helped back this. We'll get them out to you to sign. So they'll have your John Hancock there on the book itself. And once again, then we have the hardcover here, as I mentioned. So this is like 30 and 40 Canadian, which works at, I believe, 29 US for the hardcover and about 22 or 21 US for the soft cover. And then, so yeah, here we have all the editions here. Now, for those paying attention right here, we have a secret reward here. We have a special edition of the hardcover that we're going to put a little bit of extra effort into. We're putting some gold foil on the logo and the spine in the back. We're going to put in some spot gloss. We're going to put in a blue ribbon bookmark sewn in, so people have a bookmark, which won't be available in the standard hardcover edition. And we're also talking to Andrew about illustrating the end papers of the book as well. So this will be kind of like the super fan edition of Omega Rain, basically, and just a little bit extra. And it's actually the same price as the regular edition, but we've bundled it up with the digital edition because I know some people don't want to crack the spines. They don't want to do anything crazy with the book, or maybe they dip into it. It's a nice keepsake, but they maybe want the digital edition to kind of leaf through multiple times. So we've kind of bundled them. And this secret reward is only available. You'll have the link, and we'll have the link here. And we're going to be sharing the link through our Discord channel and to any subscribers of our Substack, our newsletter. We have 2 newsletters. It's Arrayed World and Hot Off the Press. It'll be going out to both, and you'll be sharing it on your Substack, which you just launched. And by the way, awesome content. I haven't been able to read them all yet, but it's been great to see you dive into a lot of comics that were an inspiration.
Oh, thanks, man. Yeah.
For you growing up there. So if anybody hasn't checked out Bill's Substack, do yourself a favor. It's a joy to read. He gets really nerdy in it, which I love.
I do.
So we'll be sharing those secret tiers there. And then, so here we have, this is the under the cover. This is all digital mock-ups that I've made just to kind of, give the vibe, but we're going to be doing a nice gold foil on the hardcover underneath. And then here we go with the preview again. And let's see what we got here. Sorry. And actually, we have a tier here. If everybody wants everything, they can get everything. They get a soft cover, a hardcover, and the digital edition. If people want, a hardcover, a soft cover to share, crease, whatever it is, So we're trying to hit all our bases here. And then right here, we'll have what we call the premium edition that will be available regularly on the campaign page. Now, this is something we've always done in our campaigns. Usually it would be called the early bird, but we no longer do an early bird as we did before. So we're calling this the premium edition tier, which will be the special hardcover I just mentioned. It'll be a print of Andrew Robinson's cover. So right now we just have what we have from him, but it'll be the full wraparound cover print available as an art piece, 9x12. So people can enjoy that if they want to have just the art as a keepsake in and of itself. We also have every premiere campaign that we do a collectible coin for them. We've done many over the years. I have a few here.
I love these things, by the way. I love these crazy coins. I collect them.
They're fun. I have them all too, and I know it's kind of like weird and nerdy, but like these are great tchotchkes. And this is our So they're beautifully engraved, and Omega Rain will get one as well, and it'll be in we're thinking a gold finish because it just feels like the white and gold of Praetorian is just like the no-brainer. And also in this tier, though, we're going to be doing a special behind-the-scenes book that we're working on you with. We're tentatively calling it Building Worlds, as our editor Darcy loves puns. So Building Worlds, and we're gonna format it like a comic. So we're gonna do a 32-page comic, and basically it'll be a behind-the-scenes showcasing your journey on your way building out Omega Rain, basically from your concepts, your notes, everything you kind of put together to make Omega Rain. And we'll also include some concept art from Andrew Robinson. Hell, I even did some concept art. I did some costume designs for you. as
Yes,
well.
you did.
So there'll be a little bit of everything peppered in there. It'll be it's kind of like the DVD extra of Omega Rain. I think it'll be a nice keepsake to look back on, encapsulating as best as we can your journey, making Omega Rain. And as you can see here, more sketches. Now we get into some fun tiers, and these are kind of silly, but I kind of love them. We have a tier called Omega Rain Make a Mask, Create a Cape. And basically this allows fans to basically make up a character name and have you put it in the book. So like while the book is written, there are some names you can swap out for certain characters, background characters, or characters that are referenced in passing, basically.
Yep.
I often refer to the Ord Mantell scene from Star Wars, and this is a line. Yeah,
Yep.
So this is we're keeping it pretty trim. We're doing it limited to 10 only, and obviously this will be by editorial discretion because I'm guessing people will become very creative, and we want to make sure nothing questionable gets in to the book. But I think that's a really fun one to work with a fan, and have a character they name put in, right?
Yeah.
And that tier also gets you the building worlds and the premium edition of the hardcover as well. And their biggest tier, which is kind of an experiential tier, is kind of a one-on-one with you about building worlds. Basically, he's taking your knowledge and experience, not only working in RPGs but also writing novels and everything else in between. Can you? I know you said we talked earlier. You dove into how this might work a little bit. Do you want to dive into that at all, or can you give people a bit of a lowdown?
No, I'd be happy to. So what we're talking about would be kind of a one-on-one seminar with me, where at that level, it would unlock like a 3-hour-long intensive creative writing course, essentially, where we could work on some content that you're putting together, send it to me in advance, I could review it, and then you get a 3-hour block where I would be working with you on what's working awesome, what could use some work, where are you trying to take it. We can kind of workshop these things to make sure that your creation can come to life in the most full way possible. I'm really excited about this because writing is such a collaborative journey that wherever you are, whatever you're doing as a creative, you stand on the shoulders of people who came before you, and you try to pass whatever you learned on to other people. And this would be a really cool experience to do, and I really look forward to it. I think the 3-hour thing is, I've been to more creative writing classes and workshops than I can count, and I can tell you that the 3-hour block is the optimum time to go deep without your mind turning into tapioca pudding.
Awesome. I think some hardcore creatives might dive into that, and we have someone who just asked, Chris Crenshaw, about that tier. So he's asking when things are going to start. So things open up tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Yes.
We'll be sharing. Set your watches. The campaign will go live at that point, and we will also share secret tiers, like I said, in our Discord, our Substack, which will be going out earlier than 9 a.m. And we'll also actually share that link below this video as well, once it lives on YouTube and our Facebook page. And we were trying to stream live to our Instagram, but unfortunately Instagram was having issues today, and that kind of fell apart a little bit. But hopefully people still get the message and make their way and find this video. And let me see. I think that's pretty much it. We have a bit more art and joy below. We have the exclusive items here, just bigger shots of them. Now, once again, keeping in mind, this isn't the full cover. Andrew is still working on this beautiful wraparound, which I think is going to be spectacular. And that's what the cover the print will encapsulate, basically. And then the Omega Rain building worlds, and then the experiential worlds. So everything's explained on the site. People can check it out tomorrow morning and get involved. And if come out early, come out and help, because that helps us game the algorithm, and then Kickstarter starts sharing it hardcore. So tell your friends, tell a whole bunch, and get them out there. I think it'll be a good day for us tomorrow. It'll be a lot of fun, and we have a lot of great tiers. So hopefully everybody gets what they want in what format they want. And if people, if people want to see something they don't see on the page, because we can't think of everything. You know, we're trying to keep these campaigns as trim and as tight as possible. But I know people might want to see something else that we never thought of. So feel free to make a comment, DM us on Kickstarter, whatever it might be. We're here to listen, basically. You know what I mean? So we're just about getting these great books and great projects out to people, and we're pretty excited by this one because it's a long time in the making. So I think I am
so thrilled, Ramon.
Wrap up on the share there, Rob. Thank you so much. So thank you for everybody for tuning in. Signed body parts. Some nice tattoos. Oh, little tattoos of your face, just so they can be able to put on.
Yeah.
So I think that pretty much wraps up the Kickstarter page. We can pull that out, Rob, and we'll end off on, because we've been, blathering on here like the charming fellows we are for an hour. So
it's been a while, yeah.
I look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And please spread the word. Every bit helps, and we'll get these books out to you. I know we have on recent campaigns talked to some of our U.S. Backers who had concerns about with all the tariffs and things happening on shipping. Rob, our shipping guru, has been diving deeper and deeper into this, where he's kind of like those movies where they just see numbers and formulas spinning around their heads. That is Rob. I think he wakes up just talking in like shipping speak. And anyways, we're doing our best to make sure that we're keeping things as affordable as possible to get books out to every backer. So we have at the bottom of the campaign, there is an estimated shipping price that we have based on current metrics. Technically, these books should be tariff-free, but things are always changing, so we can't, unfortunately, speak to that. Should that come to impact any of our shipments, we will do our best to pay the tariff ahead of time or work with our backers to get them at least some kind of recompense in that regard. So we're here to work with you. And this book we're looking at fulfilling end of the year, December. So who knows what's going to happen in the next 6 months in that regard, but we're doing our best to stay ahead of the situation. So on that note, anything else you'd like to say, Bill, before we chime out?
Just, I am super thrilled to be here. Ramon, thank you so much for this opportunity. It has been an absolute delight working with you and with Rob and Darcy and everybody else at Raid. Raid is such a fantastic team. I couldn't be more blessed to work with a better bunch of folks, and super, super excited. Thank you to everybody who's come and watched this live stream. Thank you for all the wonderful comments and the support. It's been wonderful to see. And I can't wait to see Omega Rain launch and bring it to everybody out there.
Nice. Awesome. I look forward to it too. We'll see everybody tomorrow morning. And until then, I guess peace out and good luck tomorrow. Let's do it. Cheers.
Cheers.